I was sitting at the kitchen table when my wife came home from the grocery store. She saw the notebook on the table in front of me and the pen in my hand and asked, "What are you doing?" I decided to take your challenge. I don't remember any arguments. Remember last week when we were reading those stories on that internet site? I commented on how bad some of them were and said that even I could have done better. You said I couldn't. You said I didn't have it in me to be creative. I guess I did say that, but my comment was based on what I know about your grades when we were in school. You always got a 4 and a 3 on your papers in classes that required written reports, and you got a 3 on the work you had to do for business research and report writing. Well, I think I can do better than that. Never mind, come help me get the groceries in. I helped her get the bags in and helped her put some things away, then sat back down at the table and started writing. As I was making dinner, she asked, "What are you writing about?" She asked. "I won't say anything yet. I'll let you read it when I'm done and you can critique it before I put it up on the website." I didn't think it would be too hard. Yeah, everything I did in college didn't bring in great grades, but I didn't want it to at the time. I was only doing what I had to do to survive those classes. For one thing, I didn't want to be there, but my parents more or less blackmailed me. My dad wouldn't let me work in the family business unless I had a bachelor's degree in business management. I'd worked there after school and summers since I was 13, and I wanted to work there when I graduated from high school, but Dad said no. Not without a degree. That's required for you to come here to work full-time. So I got over it and went to school. I got my degree and went to work in the family business. I lowered my gaze to my notebook, picked up a pen, and began. My name is Josh Barnum. I'm an airplane mechanic for a major airline carrier, and I'm married to Melinda Barnum. Melinda, I call her Melly, is an office manager for an insurance company. Melly and I have been together for a little over 11 years, and we have been married for 9 of those years. We met our sophomore year of college, and for me it was love at first sight. And for Melly, not so much. It took me 3 months to get a date with her. We started dating. On our 7th date, we made love for the first time. After that, we became a regular couple and usually made love 2 or 3 times a week, at least until the summer between our sophomore and junior years. I had a summer job working for my Uncle Bill, who owned a landscaping company. I worked 10 to 12 hours a day, Monday through Saturday. As a result, I was rarely able to see Melly during the week. After 3 weeks of seeing each other only on Sundays, Melly started seeing other guys. When I complained about this, she told me to get over it or lose my Sundays. It was a defining moment in our relationship. I've said before that when it came to Melly, it was love at first sight, so I would rather give up than lose her altogether. At the time, I didn't realize what a mistake that was. It showed her that, from my point of view, she could get away with a lot of things, and I would leave it at that. It was 3 weeks later, a Friday, and I had only worked 6 hours before calling a break due to severe thunderstorms. I called Melly to see if she would go out with me that night, and she told me she already had a date. I hung up without saying another word. I called around to see if anything was going on and found out that Mike Matson was having a party at his house. I called and found out I was welcome, so I decided to go. It was a bad move on my part. I walked in just in time to see Melly hugging and then kissing Dick Moore. Then they went out onto an improvised dance floor where Melly clung to Dick and they danced slowly to a song. Dick held her ass with both hands and pulled her tightly against him. Melly wrapped her arms around his neck, pulled his face to hers, and gave him a hot, lingering kiss. When the song ended, they seemed reluctant to pull away from each other, but when they finally did, Melly saw me. She said something to Dick and then headed in my direction. I turned, stepped away from her, and left the party. She probably had my phone number to reach me, but I'd be damned if I was going to stick around while she made out with someone else. The weather wasn't bad on Saturday, so I ended up switching to a 12-hour workday. I learned not to waste time calling Melly on Saturday night to set up a date for Sunday, because she would be out with someone. I usually called her around 10 o'clock on Sunday and arranged something for the evening. But I didn't call that Sunday morning. It was one thing to know she was dating when I was unavailable, but quite another to know she was making out with her beau. The heat I noticed between her and her beau was a sign that they were probably fucking too. That put a bad thought in my head. According to what Melly had told me, that she hadn't been out with any guy for more than 4 dates, the question I'd been asking myself after what I'd seen at Matson's was Melly sleeping with all of them? If she had, I could have been in trouble since we usually made love on our Sunday dates. I had heard and believed that when you have sex with someone, you have sex with everyone that person has had sex with. I thought that maybe getting tested for STDs would be a good idea, figuring that since Melly hadn't heard from me on Sunday morning, she might call me. I got the hell out of the house and was gone all day. When I got home for dinner, my mom told me that Melly had called twice and wanted me to call her when I got home. I waited until I finished dinner to call her. She got right on the case. "Why didn't you call me this morning?" I just thought, considering the way you made out with that guy last time, that I'd been replaced. We've already talked about this, Josh. I'm not staying home for premiere dates just because you can't make it. I know, and I got over it when I thought they were just platonic dates, but what I saw last time was far, far beyond platonic. I thought you and I had something special, but I'm not so sure anymore. Don't say that, Josh. We do have something special. We need to talk, baby. I don't care what time you work until tomorrow, but when you're free, come see me. Will you do that? I think I can. Promise me? All right. I'll come to you when I'm free. Monday was a 12-hour workday, so I didn't get to Melly's house until the beginning of the 9th. Her mom opened the door and told me that Melly was waiting for me on the patio. Melly was on the phone with her back to the door when I got outside, and what I overheard before she closed her phone didn't bode well for our relationship. What I heard was, "I loved what we did on Friday. I can't wait to see you on Tuesday. I have to go now. He'll be here soon. Bye." I walked back into the house and then opened the patio door with a great deal of noise. She turned around and saw me coming out of the house. I didn't give any sign that I overheard anything. I just walked over to the table and sat down. I just looked at her and waited. She finally realized that I wasn't going to start a conversation, so she said, "What's wrong, Josh? You agreed to my dates when you couldn't make the time." That's when I thought these dates were something like going to a movie and maybe a milkshake at Harry's afterwards. Or maybe a party like Matson's where you'd dance and socialize with our friends. Simple things, so you could act like you're still my girlfriend. It's nothing like what I've seen at Matson's. The way you made out with that guy and let him run his hands all over your body without even trying to stop him pretty much told me that if he wasn't already fucking you, he would soon. Not the way I expected my girlfriend to behave in front of my friends. It's disgusting what you're telling me. I'm telling it like it is. Maybe you should just leave. I guess that would be the best thing to do. After what I've seen and not knowing if that's how you feel about all your dates, I think it might be a good idea to get tested. I stood up and left her with a shocked expression on my face. I made it to my car before she caught up with me. You don't really think of me that way, do you? What I saw Friday night was pretty rough, Melly. I don't want to take any chances. I got in the car and drove away, and she stood there staring after me. I did get tested and turned out to be healthy, but I never called Melly to let her know. We avoided each other for a little over a week, and then on Thursday, when I was eating lunch in the student dining hall, Melly came over to my table, sat down, and said, "You didn't call me on Sunday? That wasn't necessary." "You're being unfair, Josh. Why do you expect me to stay home 6 days a week because of your job?" "Maybe because I look at it as on-the-job training." "What the hell does that mean?" "Maybe it's to prepare you for what you might have to do after you get married, and your husband has a job that makes him work late." "That's just silly. Being married isn't the same as going to school." "Maybe the way you look at it, but not the way I look at it. You knew all along that I intended to ask you to marry me after graduation, and you led me to believe you'd say yes. You know that my major is aviation maintenance management, and when I graduate, I will have my airplane and propulsion license. My goal is to work for an airline and get promoted. There's a darn good chance that if I do join an airline as a newbie, I'll have the worst shift and the worst weekends. If you can't handle my work schedule now, how are you going to handle my 3 to 11 shift, with Tuesdays and Wednesdays off?" "That's different. I'll work too, and we'll do whatever is necessary to adjust to our circumstances." "That's in the future if we have one. Right now we need to survive as a couple, and I'm not sure we can, given what I now know about your dating." We agreed to talk that night after I finished work, and eventually she gave in and said she would only party on Fridays and Saturdays and would always make sure the dates were with my friends. That way, I could always ask someone if she was doing anything that wouldn't pass the boyfriend test. It helped that landscaping was a seasonal job that ended in late fall. For the rest of our freshman year, and all the way through senior year, I kept a close eye on her, and she only flipped out 3 times, and I pretended I didn't know anything. Why? I blame it on love. When we graduated, Melly moved in with me and we lived together while our mother prepared the wedding. It was a new experience for both of us, to be able to make love every day and not have to rush back home. There were nights when I wasn't at all sure I would be able to get out of bed in the morning. It seemed like all Melly and I, oh yes, and myself, wanted was to make love all the time, but of course we couldn't. I did get along with the airline, and as always, I had the worst shift, 4 to midnight, and my days off were Wednesday and Thursday. Melly had a degree in accounting, and she got a job at an accounting firm where she worked 8 to 5, and Saturday and Sunday were weekends. During tax season, from about the end of January through the 1st of May, she usually worked 10 to 12 hours a day, and sometimes she had to work Saturdays. We were married 5 months after graduation, and our wedding gift from both sets of parents was a down payment on a 4-bedroom house in one of the best neighborhoods in town. Neither of us wanted to have children until we were established in our jobs, so Melly used one of the bedrooms as a home office. There was a fairly large patio in the back of the house, and one of our first purchases after moving in was a 6-person hot tub on one side of the patio. It didn't take long before it started to feel like it was always full. We had a housewarming party a month after the tub was installed, and after everyone tried out the tub, it started to feel like we had company gathering every weekend. Not that I liked that company. I had to leave at 2:45 to get to work on time. As we got to know our neighbors, we started getting invited to barbecues and picnics, and once that started happening, of course, we had to have a couple of our own. We became really good friends with the neighbors on either side of us and those who live right across the street. Things went great for the first 2 years, and we adjusted to our different schedules, and then things changed. I found out much later, but it was pretty much what I was talking about when I talked to Melly back in college. I was working Friday and Saturday nights, and Melly was tired of staying home on the best date nights. At first, it was a night out with the girls after work on Friday, nights she never told me about. After a couple months, she decided that since she could get away with me not finding out about her night out with the girls, she could get away with going out on Saturdays. She just needed to make sure she would be home, in bed, by the time I got home. She started going out with guys she worked with and guys she met at her friends' parties. I don't know when the hell this started, so I had no idea how long it had been going on, but it was reported to me by a neighbor who lived across the street. Friday night after dinner, he was having a drink with a client and saw Melly dirty dancing with some guy and acting like a pussy. Saturday morning, when Melly had gone shopping, he came over and told me what he'd seen. It upset me, but didn't surprise me. He told me that his brother was a police officer who moonlighted as a private investigator on his days off, and his brother's days off were Friday and Saturday. He said his brother's rates were 25% of what a full-time private investigator would charge, so I asked him to contact me. All it cost me was for him to follow Melly from Friday, when she finished work, until she went home, and Saturday, from the time I left for work until she came home, cost $600, and it was worth every penny. On Friday, when Melly got home from work, she headed straight to the bar, and no sooner had she sat down on the bar stool than a guy bought her a drink and danced with her. They left the bar at 8 and checked into the motel, and yes, they left the lights on for them, and stayed in room 107 until 11, and then she went home. She didn't even leave the house on Saturday. Her boss from work stopped by at 4, and although Spencer, the cop, couldn't film what was going on in the house, he did get some pretty good footage of Melly fornicating with her boss. On my first day off, I took everything I had to a divorce attorney, and after reviewing what I had, he suggested that I contact her boss for an alienation of affections and her company if there was anything in their company's policy and procedure manual about the relationship between supervisors and those they supervise. I told him that her boss owned the company, and when I told him that, I could almost see the dollar signs in his eyes. I told him to go ahead and take over. He asked me to give him a week or so, and that he would prepare the paperwork so I could come in and sign it. I left his office, hoping I could act like a know-nothing cuckold, which I was until I got the Spencer report. I guess I succeeded, because next to me, Melly didn't seem any different. The lawyer called me a week later and told me he had the paperwork ready for my signature. When I got to his office, he was smiling and said he had some very good news for me, Apparently, her boss was bragging to everyone in the office that he had Melly. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm pretty sure the overheard conversation is just a rumor. It's basically a case of him saying he didn't say anything. Maybe if it wasn't taped. The man I got the tape from hates Philby and is always looking for some way to do him a disservice. Isn't there some law that says both parties have to be aware of the tape? In some states, yes, but this state is not one of them. All right, then, go ahead and do what you think is best. I finished the story, reread it, and decided it was okay. I looked at the clock and saw that it was almost dinner time. I called my wife from the kitchen and handed her the story and asked her to read it and comment to me. She took the story from me and started reading it. About halfway through, she started to frown, and finally, with a loud whoop, she looked at me and fainted. I got up, grabbed a glass of water, and splashed it in her face. She mumbled something as I helped her up. Just then, the doorbell rang, and I told her it was probably for her. She looked confused as I walked her to the door. She opened the door and saw a young blonde-haired girl standing there. The blonde stopped chewing her gum long enough to ask, "Mrs. Melinda Barnum?" Melinda said yes, and the blonde handed her an envelope with the words, "You have been notified. Have a nice evening." And she turned and walked away. Melinda didn't hear the last sentence. She fainted again when she heard she had been notified. This time I didn't bother with a glass of water. I just grabbed her leg and dragged her into the room far enough to close the door, then went into the kitchen and got myself a beer. Then I went into the living room and turned on the TV.